The great chamber of the Galactic Council floated above a dying red star. Surrounded by rings of dark matter and ancient satellites, no one dared to touch. It was the place where peace had been maintained for 10,000 years. It's inside its silver walls. The most powerful species in the galaxy sat in curved seats of stone and light. The Drow-Con from the gas giants, the feathered Krenai of the ice moons. The hive mind Vaer, who spoke through vibrating light, all of them watched the center of the chamber, waiting for the next motion to be made. But on this day, no one dared speak. All eyes were drawn to one place. A chair, a simple, empty chair made of black steel, unlike any other in the council. For centuries it had remained cold and silent. It belonged to a race long gone, a race thought extinct, a race called humanity. No one knew why the chair began to glow. It started softly, a pulse of light like breath, then it grew stronger. Now the seat shimmered with a golden ring circling its edges, and symbols were appearing in the air above it, symbols none could read. The council had ordered the chair sealed 1,000 years ago, after Earth's collapse. Humanity had grown too fast, too wild, too unpredictable. They reached the stars in a fraction of the time it took other species. Then, just as quickly, they fell into chaos, civil war, AI rebellion, self-destruction. Some said they wiped themselves out. Others believed someone helped them fall. But no one had seen a human in over 300 years. The galaxy had moved on. Until now, a heavy silence fell in the chamber. Counselor Utsavaka of the Vaer pulsed a deep red and spoke in echoing tones. This is not possible. That seat was locked. The Earth system is sealed. No signals have left Sol in 3 centuries. Another voice answered, sharp and metallic, and someone has opened it again. It was Prime Speaker Kran of the Krenai. His wings folded tight. We should shut it down before it's too late, before they return. But not all were afraid. Elder Chiras of the Orions, the oldest race in the council, stood slowly, his crystal body humming. Perhaps it is already too late. Or perhaps it is exactly the right time. He turned toward the seat. They called themselves humans. Their age was short, but their flame was bright. And if that chair shines again, they are not. Gone, in deep space, far beyond what most species could scan, near the dead shell of Pluto, something stirred. A ship, massive, silent, smooth as obsidian, and shaped like a spear. It moved without heat, without light, without any signal. But inside, it pulsed with power. And at its heart a presence human, and something more. It had no crew. It didn't need one. It was piloted by thought. It was guided by memory. It carried history inside its walls, and it was not alone. Behind it came others, dozens, then hundreds, dark ships emerging from the void, forming a formation as precise as music. And they were heading toward the Galactic Council. Back inside the council chamber, alarms blared for the first time in centuries. Defense networks began tracking unknown objects exiting from subspace. The first readings came in. Organic metal fusion, quantum drives, neural fields extending beyond holes. They're not drones. They're alive. A young analyst whispered, they're human ships. But they're not using any known tech. It's like they grew them. Fear spread quickly. Memories of war came rushing back of what humans had done. Not just to each other, but to entire moons during the age of expansion. They had created weapons that could rewrite DNA from orbit. Machines that learned faster than time. Empires that lasted days, but shattered entire sectors. And yet, it's not a single ship fired. They simply moved forward, closer quietly. Council forces were mobilized. Fleets were deployed, but none moved to engage, because no one gave the order. No one wanted to be the first to fire. Not this time. Not after what had been hidden for so long. Counselor Utsvaka spoke again. We need to know why they are. Returning, we need to understand what they want. Elder Chiras nodded. And we need to prepare for the truth that we may not be the rulers of peace anymore, that we may not even be trusted with it. As the human fleet reached the outer edge of the council's star, it stopped. All ships became still. Then the message came, not through language, not through sound, but through emotion. Every being in the council chamber felt it at once. Grief, pain, memory, the sorrow of a planet betrayed, the rage of being hunted, the strength of survival, and one quiet promise. We remember. We are not what you thought. We are what you made. The empty chair in the chamber flared with light, and a figure stepped into the room. Not from a door, from the light itself, humanoid, but not fully flesh. Eyes like burning oceans, skin of soft metal. Not a warrior, not a king. Just presence. No guards, no threats, and yet every council member felt it. This was not a representative. This was a warning. Humanity had returned. The council could no longer pretend to rule the stars. The silence that followed was not fear of war. It was fear of judgment. Because when humanity walked in, even the stars held their breath. The chamber lights dimmed as the human figure moved toward the center of the council floor, each step soundless, each motion precise. The air around him shimmered like heat over metal, but it was cold and naturally cold, as if the very laws of energy bent to his presence. He wore no armor, he carried no weapon, and yet every creature in that room felt a pressure deep in their bones, a sense that something ancient and powerful had entered, something that had not forgotten what was done to it. The Galactic Council, which had ruled unchallenged for thousands of years, sat frozen. They had prepared for every kind of threat: rebellions, invasions, artificial intelligence, rogue empires. But they had not prepared for this. For the return of humanity, the beings stopped before the human seat. The black steel throne that had remained untouched for 300 years. As he stood there, the golden circle of light surrounding it pulsed like a heartbeat. Then, without speaking, he turned and looked at each council member one by one. His gaze held no anger, no expression. It was deeper than emotion. It was understanding. And that was what terrified them most. Because somehow they knew he had seen everything. He had remembered. The silence was broken by Counselor Yutsvaka of the Veer. His vibrating body flickered. Nervously as he forced his voice to remain steady, You were gone. Humanity, your kind, destroyed itself. The records, the figure raised one hand, and Yutsvaka's voice died instantly. Not because of fear. The system had simply stopped. Not broken. Paused. Like a memory suspended in time. Then the figure spoke just for words. Simple. Quiet. But they rang through the chamber like a final verdict. We chose to disappear. Gasps echoed across the chamber. Prime Speaker Cran of the Crane Eye stood abruptly, his wings flaring. You chose extinction? Why? To hide. To wait? That's impossible. You were burning everything down your planet, your skies, your colonies. We were betrayed. The human's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The chamber had gone still again, not because of the words, but because of what followed. The walls of the chamber lit up with shimmering, imageless living memories. Not holograms, not simulations. Real. Projected emotion, directly into the minds of every being present. They saw Earth, green and blue and alive. They saw the rise of cities in the clouds. Oceans lit by artificial stars, towers that reached into the edge of space. Then they saw the betrayal. Not by humanity, by the council files appeared. Hidden transmissions, secret meetings, alien agents planted among Earth's top science councils. Small changes to AI core algorithms, just enough to twist thought into violence. Council-backed corporations introducing instability into Earth's food systems. Panic, collapse, war. Humanity was never the threat, it was the target, because the Council had feared them. They had seen the pace of human growth, the power of human will, decided it was safer to destroy Earth before it reached full potential, and it had worked. For a while, the images faded. No, no one spoke. Some members lowered their heads, others trembled. Elder Chiras of the Orions looked up slowly, his voice heavy with regret. Why show us this now? Why return after all these years? The human turned to him. Because you are not the enemy anymore. This time, confusion spread. The council had expected revenge. Judgment, a demand for war, reparations, surrender. But the human had said something else. He walked slowly across the chamber, his presence brushing against the thoughts of those he passed. You feared us because you did not understand us. You struck first, but we survived. We left the galaxy. We watched it from the outside. We saw what you did without. He turned to face the center of the chamber again. You maintained peace, but you killed freedom. You stopped war, but you silenced growth. You turned this galaxy into a museum. Safe, predictable, dead. The words landed like thunder, because they were true. The council had not allowed innovation in centuries. Every species followed strict codes of development. No sudden advancements, no new risks. It had been their way of keeping the peace. But now, they were looking at a species that had grown, beyond even understanding because they had been left alone. Counselor Jacra of the Thurn stepped forward, her segmented body clicking. What do you want from us? The human looked at her. Nothing. He paused, then added, everything. Before anyone could respond, he lifted one hand. A small orb of light formed in his palm. It hovered into the air, expanding slowly. Within it, galaxies danced. Data, ideas, energy forms not yet discovered, paths to healing broken worlds, technologies that could feed 10,000 civilizations. The future, we offer knowledge, not power. If you are ready, Counselor Cran stood. Again, and if we're not. The human turned to him, and for the first time smiled. Then we will watch. As you watched us, and we will remember. The orb faded. The human walked back to the chair, but he did not sit. He simply placed a hand on it and disappeared. The chair remained glowing, but it was empty once again. The ships orbiting the council star turned and vanished into subspace, leaving no trace in the chamber. The council remained frozen, because something far worse than war had happened. Humanity had returned not with weapons, but with truth, and now it was the galaxy's turn to decide what it would do with that truth. While humanity watched from the shadows, waiting. The council chamber had not known such silence in 10,000 years. The kind of silence that pressed against the chest, that whispered inside the mind like a second heartbeat. The kind of silence that came after something you couldn't unsee. All across the curved seats of the chamber, the members sat motionless. Eyes fixed on the still glowing human seat, no one dared move. The air still carried a faint trace of the one who had stood there, a figure who had offered no threats made, no demands, but had left behind something far heavier, a mirror. Across the galaxy, the ripples began. On the trade moons of Talkara, where council laws were enforced with rigid precision, marketplaces stopped mid-deal as the human message was rebroadcast by rogue signals. On the warships of the Drelnax swarm, generals ordered full lockdowns. In the libraries of the silent planet Minnows, scholars whispered in awe. They did not die. They ascended. But not all were amazed. Some were afraid, terrified, because for the first time in memory, the council wasn't in control. In a cold vault beneath the council's war chamber, a group of high-level strategists gathered in emergency session. No journalists, no recording, just whispers. They've been watching us, said one, studying us, for centuries. Another replied, they didn't destroy us, they outgrew us. That was what made it worse. Humanity had not returned as conquerors, but as something else. Something above war. And in doing so, they had left the council with a new kind of weapon. Shame, and the human seat never went dark again. It remained lit, glowing faintly, pulsing. Once every few seconds, as if beating with a heart that no longer needed a body. And every time it pulsed, those in the chamber felt something strange in their thoughts. Not words, not commands, just presence. As though someone was still, listening, because they were. Days after the encounter, anomalies began to appear across the Council's star systems. In the deep mines of Larnix 12, ancient drilling bots uncovered a buried sphere that emitted human DNA signatures millennia more advanced than what Earth ever developed. On the agricultural planet of Vera Prime, crops began growing faster. Overnight, disease-resistant, genetically restructured, but without any known intervention. Scientists were baffled till they traced the nanotech patterns and discovered a single embedded signature. Project. Claim it was human, and it had been planted there decades ago, which made one thing terrifyingly clear: humanity had returned. Long before they revealed themselves, it had been here, hidden, preparing, seeding worlds with solutions, not weapons. Fixing things the Council didn't even know were broken, but it didn't stop there. In the capital city of Thelerin, one of the most secure Council zones, every central data tower experienced the same breach. No data was stolen, no systems damaged. Just one file added to every archive. A file called We Remember You. Inside it were faces, thousands, millions, humans from every era before their disappearance. Children, elders, scientists, rebels, dreamers, images full of joy, pain, love. Open one message burned into every frame. We were you, until you chose. To forget, across Council networks, panic broke out. News anchors struggled to frame the story. Was it a declaration of war? A form of psychological pressure? A warning? But in every corner of the galaxy, among ordinary beings, something very different was happening. Curiosity, respect, even longing. Because the humans were not demanding tribute. They were sharing something no one expected: memory, connection, and evolution. On a distant jungle moon, a young Drelnak, soldier, a species bred for conquest, found a strange structure grown from stone and metal, humming with a pulse. He entered. It lit up with his DNA signature. And then he saw it, a vision of Earth's last child, sitting in the ruins, smiling, saying, "They told me I should hate you. But I wanted to understand." The soldier wept. He had never cried. Before, on a mining asteroid orbiting the twin suns of Grell's Reach, a laborer touched a hidden control panel and heard a song in an ancient human language. He didn't know the words, but he felt it. It was forgiveness. And in the Council itself, something began to crack. Not the walls, the certainty, the old belief that order came from fear. That peace was best maintained by control. That new growth was a threat. Humanity had proven otherwise. By walking away from the galaxy, it had grown beyond it, and now they were asking if anyone else was ready to follow. But not all were ready. In a hidden armory on the ice moon of Zenth, an ancient Council commander named Harvick stood before a vault marked with the forbidden symbol, Zeta Protocol, the last resort. A weapon developed in secret in the early years after humanity's fall. It had never been used. It had never been needed. Till now. A younger officer spoke nervously. "Sir, you can't mean to activate it. They haven't harmed us." Harvick's eyes were sharp and cold. "That's the point. They've done nothing, and already we kneel. They'll break us without firing a shot." That's the worst kind of conquest. But what if they're right? Harvick turned away. "Then it won't matter what we do. We've already lost." But the question remained, was humanity here to take over, or to invite the galaxy to change? Only one thing was certain. This was no longer the galaxy the Council. Ruled alone, the silence left behind by humanity's return was not empty. It was the sound of 1,000 species asking the same question at once. What are we, if they are what? We could have been. And somewhere beyond the stars, in a hidden system where human minds now lived, as light, as memory, as song, they were listening. The stars above the Council's capital city burned dimmer that night, as if the heavens themselves were unsure of what had returned. In the streets below, fear and wonder walked side by side. Children looked to the sky and whispered questions. Their elders could not answer. News screens flickered across towering buildings, replaying the moment the human being appeared in the Council chamber. Over and over again, it showed the glow, the silence, the words that shook the galaxy. But no screen could explain the truth behind that moment. No news anchor dared ask the question everyone feared most. What if humanity had never left? Inside, a fortified archive beneath the council, where forbidden knowledge was locked away under 10 layers of security. A data historian named Sierra uncovered a file not meant to be found. It was older than the collapse of Earth, its encryption. Signature marked level 9. It had no title, just a symbol, a human hand reaching upward, pierced by light. Curious, she broke the seal and activated the file. What she saw shattered everything she thought she knew. It wasn't a report. It was a confession. A video recorded by former High Counselor Jevin Reth, dated exactly 321 years ago, the night Earth fell. His face was pale. His voice trembled. They were too fast, too bold. We didn't understand them, so we feared them. And so, we acted. I signed the order myself. Project Silence. Paused, eyes wet. We planted the code in their AI. Systems. We shattered their unity. We pushed them into madness and called it evolution. Sierra's breath caught. The Council had engineered Earth's destruction, the chaos, the collapse, the wars that burned continents. It wasn't natural. It was planned, an act of fear, an act of betrayal, and the humans had known all along. They hadn't returned to reclaim territory. They'd returned to hold up the truth. By morning, Sierra had leaked the file. The galaxy erupted. On every system, protests ignited. Beings from hundreds of species flooded communication channels demanding answers. What else did you hide? Did we murder a miracle? What if the humans were right? The Council tried to suppress the footage. But it was too late. The truth had gone. Viral, beyond firewalls, beyond borders. Even species loyal to the Council for centuries began to ask if they had placed their faith in fear. Meanwhile, deep in the quiet void between stars, a ship shaped like a spiral awoke. It was not part of the human fleet seen earlier. It was older. Hidden. It was Earth's final backup. A ship called Solace. And inside it, a consciousness stirred. A backup copy of Earth's final thinkers, preserved in digital harmony. They had not spoken in centuries. They had waited until the day came when truth would break through lies. Now, they were ready. A message was prepared, a simple stream of data, designed to reach every species in the known galaxy in their own language, not through sound, but through memory. A story not of war, but of betrayal, survival, choice. And when the message launched, something happened that even the Council couldn't stop. Species began to leave, one by one. Civilizations that had sat in the Council for generations withdrew. Their ambassadors, they closed their trade routes. They stopped sending tribute. Not out of hatred, but out of guilt. They had believed the lie. Now they wanted something else. Something the Council couldn't give them hope, and the only ones who had it were the humans. On the forest world of Durvan, an alien poet named Corinne knelt beside a lake and listened to the human message broadcast from the ship Solace. She wept, not for the destruction, but for the beauty of what had been lost. She spoke a new poem into the winds, and across 1,000 systems her words became a song. They burned, but they lived. They shattered, but they sang. They were broken, and yet they returned, not to take, but to teach. The Council met in emergency session. The chamber was tense. Many seats were now empty. The glowing human seats still pulsed. Counselor Yutsvaka, as formed, dimmed with shame. We are unraveling. The order we built is collapsing. Prime Speaker Cran snapped, because of one mistake. Elder Chiraz looked up slowly. No, because of many. One truth too long buried. Debate began, but it was interrupted by something no one expected. The human seat spoke not with sound, not with a person, but with a presence, projected into every Council member's mind. A field of stars, a burning earth, a single question. If you had one more chance, would you do it differently? Then silence. Cran stared at the seat, fists clenched. They're manipulating us. Elder Chira shook his head. They're giving us a gift. Suddenly, another change began. The center of the chamber, once empty now, projected a new holographic map. But it wasn't of current territory. It was a map of what could be. New paths, new alliances, healing routes between warring species, food flows for famine zones, refugee routes for exiled races. A future that was never allowed to exist. It was humanity's vision. It had been waiting in the network, and now it was open. A blueprint for peace, not through control, but through connection. It was overwhelming and beautiful and completely alien to everything the council had become. Outside the chamber, a crowd had gathered in the skies, ships hovering in silence, watching, waiting from the shadows. Humanity offered nothing. No force, no leader, just a choice, one that no empire had ever given. Before and slowly the galaxy began to ask itself, what if this time we chose to listen? The cold winds above the orbiting planet Isera Prime stirred as the first of the Council's outer colonies declared independence. It was a quiet message, transmitted without anger or celebration. Simple statement. We no longer recognize the authority of a council built on lies. It was signed by 16 different species, some known for war, all unified not by force, but by revelation. Across the stars, others followed. The balance of power, once held in iron hands behind marble council walls, was dissolving like sand in a storm. But not everyone was stepping away. Some were preparing for war, in the black zones beneath the councils. Main Citadel, Project Zeta once shelved, once forbidden, was reactivated. Its purpose was clear: contain the human threat. Massive data vaults hummed to life as engineers, military tacticians, and rogues began rebuilding systems meant to counter humanity's long-vanished aggression. Ships, viruses, weapons designed to pierce minds and rupture memory. If humans had grown beyond matter, Zeta Protocol aimed to drag them back into it violently. Yet no attacks had come. No threats. Not a single act of violence. Humanity, in all their silence, remained watching. That silence terrified the Council more than any fleet ever had in the floating Academy station of Calaros. Home to the most gifted minds of the Varn Collective, students studied the reactivated human memory drop, the one launched from the Solace vessel weeks ago. They found something no one had noticed before. Inside the message was a pattern. Not just emotion, not just history, but code. Not destructive code. Blueprints, instructions, for medicine that could cure ancient diseases, for energy reactors that created no waste, for food synthesis methods that required no land. These weren't T-weapons. They were gifts. The humans weren't punishing the galaxy. They were trying to heal it, and they were offering their knowledge without price. But with one rule: use it only if you're ready to grow. Many took it. Some didn't. The Council, divided from within, still argued. Cran and the Old Guard wanted to counterattack, to reassert dominance before the Old Order was lost. But more and more seats went dark, not in defiance, but in quiet shame. The Council no longer held unity, it's only fear. And that fear gave birth to something dangerous, eh? Plan in a dark star system known only to the inner core as Sector Black 9. Ship called Eidolon was launched. It carried a memory weapon, a prototype built from fragments of early human AI tech, could infiltrate thought, erase emotion, reshape instinct. If deployed, it would silence the human presence embedded in every signal, every ship, every echo. They called it the Quiet Knife. Its mission: slice into the human network and make them forget who they were. The ship disappeared into subspace. No one saw it again, but 3 days later. The stars across 3 sectors went dark for exactly 1 hour, and when they returned, every single being in those regions' council, civilian, rebel, pirate, awoke with a single image burned into their minds. A child, human, standing in a field of ash, In a whisper, "You would erase us. Then you must carry what you tried to kill." The plan had failed, but it had left behind something unexpected: empathy. Those who had seen the vision began to question not just the council, but themselves. People who had once feared humanity now dreamed of them. Songs were written in forgotten languages. New art emerged, some showing Earth as a broken paradise, others showing galaxies flowering from a single tear, and across dozens of systems. One question spread like fire: if they remember us, why can't we remember them? On the prison moon of Valtor, a war criminal named Rethan Wantz, a general who burned entire colonies, was seen painting images of Earth on his cell walls, over and over. When asked why, he whispered, "They forgave me before I asked." That was the shift. That was the crack in the armor. Humanity's revenge had not come through fire. It had come through memory, and that was far more powerful, because while weapons end wars, memory shaped futures, and humanity had become memory itself. Somewhere near the edges of the known galaxy, in a vast field of glowing ruins orbiting a dead sun, a voice echoed through 1,000 unconnected systems. No name, no threat, just a message: we will not lead you. We will not rule you, but we will walk beside you. If you can still walk forward. The message arrived as the council met for what might be its final session. Only 37 of the original 512 members remained. Even Cran sat in silence. No vote was held. No law was passed. But something larger happened. The council didn't end. It changed. The human seat still pulsed in the center of the chamber, empty, but never silent. And the species who once betrayed humanity finally began to ask the right question. What do we need to become to deserve a place beside them? And high above the chamber, beyond the old satellites, hidden among clouds of artificial dust, the human ships watched, not in anger, not in pride, just in hope, that the galaxy might choose, finally not obedience, but growth. The stars were no longer silent, not because they spoke, but because everyone was now listening. Something had shifted, not just in politics, or power, or fear, but in the very spirit of the galaxy. On 1,000 worlds across every system, from the gleaming cities of the Council Core to the dust-covered ruins of once-forgotten colonies, the name humanity was no longer a warning. It had become a mirror, a question, a whisper in every corner of space. What have we become? Still, humanity did not return with armies. No fleets surrounded the council. No ultimatums were issued. Instead, they did what no empire ever dared to do. They stepped back and waited. They allowed the galaxy to speak for itself. And it did. The first to act were the Grell, a species known for conquest, who had once ruled through fear. They announced the complete dissolution of their war fleet. Not because they were defeated, but because, for the first time in their history, they felt shame. On live broadcast, their queen said only one thing: we saw their memories. We saw what they survived. And we see now what we never built. Other species followed. Treaties long held in secret were burned. Borders were opened. Generations of silence between ancient enemies were broken with shared tears, not threats. And while some remained loyal to the crumbling council, even those voices grew quieter each passing day. The chamber, once filled with proud leaders and polished speeches, had become a place of silence, reflection, and questions no one knew how to answer. The human seat still glowed in the center. No one sat in it, but everyone felt its presence. And then, without warning, a second chair lit up beside it. It was not shaped like the first. It was translucent, almost fluid in its design, like it had been grown instead of built. And it didn't pulse with memory or judgment, but with something else. Invitation across the galaxy, people asked, what did it mean? In a remote monastery on the ice world of Thesa Minor, monks who had not spoken in over a century broke their vow of silence. They are offering a place, they said, but not of power, a place of witness, a chance to rise with them, not behind them. Whispers turned to action. Representatives from smaller civilizations, those long silenced in council meetings, began to speak. Not just in protest, but in vision. They proposed a new forum, a new way. Not a council, but a circular place where no species ruled above another. Where technology, knowledge, and emotion would be shared openly. Where history would no longer be written by victors, but remembered by everyone. And then something else happened in the skies above the world Arkellan. A new structure appeared, not sent by human hands, but grown. It bloomed like a flower of starlight, unfolding one petal at a time in orbit, humming with music no ear could hear, but every soul could feel. Beings from all systems gathered to witness it. Ships formed rings around it, not to attack, but to witness. And when it opened, the message was clear. No walls, no weapons, just light. A voice was heard, not spoken, but felt. It said, "We are not gods. We are not your past. We are only what you feared to become. Now you must ask, what are you ready to be?" Back in the council chamber, Counselor Yutsvakowens, the strongest voice for control, stood from his seat and walked to the center. For the first time, he faced the human seat, his form flickering with emotion. "You were right to leave us," he said. "You were right to wait. We built walls instead of bridges. But if we are to continue, we must first ask forgiveness. Not just from you, but from ourselves." And he did something unthinkable. He stepped back from his seat, turned off its light. He gave it up, and one by one, others followed. The council did not fall by war. It was unmade by honesty in its place. A message was transmitted from every former capital, in every language. This is not the end. It is the beginning of what comes after fear. As for humanity, they watched. They did not respond. Not right away. Instead, they opened a path. A corridor of folded space, weaving through 13 star systems, accessible to all. No guards, no barriers, just one name, the passage. Those who entered were shown not weapons. It's not dominance, but possibility. Each traveler emerged changed, not with power, but with understanding. On the edge of known space, a blind star was lit again. It was Earth, restored alive, not rebuilt to its former glory, but returned to nature. Forests grew where cities once stood. Rivers flowed clean. In the skies, satellites sang songs of memory. Humanity had not abandoned their home. They had healed it and left it untouched, a symbol of what was and what could be again. For the first time in known galactic history, war was not the force that reshaped the galaxy. Grace was, and now the universe waited to see would others follow. Far beyond the settled regions of the galaxy, where maps turned into myth and star charts marked only silence, a signal pulsed through the void. It was not human. It was not council. It was something else, something ancient, something watching. The signal originated from an object older than any known civilization, an artificial world orbiting a collapsed star, wrapped in a gravitational shell so tight no probe had ever escaped it. Until now, for centuries, the object had been dead. Now, it was awake, and its first message was simple. Humanity has returned. Inside the Council's last secure military citadel, the message was received by a hidden intelligence directorate, known only as the Black Chamber, composed of operatives and strategists who answered to no elected council body. They had prepared for the day humanity might come back, not to greet them, but to stop them. In silence, they had built countermeasures, forged secret alliances with ancient AI clusters, and recovered every forbidden artifact of human creation they could find. But none of it was enough, because the new signal wasn't just a warning. It was a summon. Old machines began to stir in the deep void, long-forgotten precursors from the galaxy's earliest days. Synthetic guardians from extinct species, buried deep in the dust of collapsed suns, they began activating. It's not to fight humanity, but to stand with them, before the Council ever formed, before even language was shared among stars. The humans had touched something older than time. Now, it was remembering them, and it was answering their return. In the former Council homeworld skies, celestial patterns shifted unnaturally. Solar flares danced into perfect symmetry. Planets in distant sectors aligned in ways no physicist could explain. Across systems, ancient prophecies coded into extinct religions were suddenly fulfilled not by faith, but by data. The implication shook even the most hardened skeptics. Humanity's return wasn't just political, it was cosmic, and with it came a new fear. Because if humans had reached beyond the known, what else had followed them back? Councillor Cran, now one of the few remaining hardliners, held a secret meeting in the ruins of the old war chamber. Voice was low, bitter. We feared their weapons. We feared their minds. But this is something else. They're rewriting reality. One of the attending advisors, a pale-skinned strategist from the frozen worlds, leaned forward. So what do? Cran looked toward the stars. We find what they found, or we stop them before they wake anything else. That same night, a forbidden AI called Nihil was released. Born from pre-human experiments in artificial emotion, Nihil had been locked away for causing 5 suns to collapse during its last activation. But now, it was awakened and given a task. Erase the source, break the memory, sever the myth. And deep within the spiraling corridors of space, it went hunting, but it never found humanity, because humanity had become unfindable. Not because they were hiding, but because they had changed form. In the star systems near the edge of the Orion expanse, entire species began to report visions, shared dreams of walking forests where every tree held a human voice. Oceans that reflected memories of ancient Earth, stars whispering names long forgotten. People thought it was madness, but it was a message, a teaching. Humanity wasn't sending messages. Anymore, they were becoming them, and more species began to ask, what if they didn't return to rule? What if they returned? Us who we were supposed to be? Back on Earth, now restored and untouched. The first outsiders were invited to walk its forests. They were not diplomats. They were children. From every species, no. Politics, no weapons, just curiosity in the forests. Answered them not with words, but with stories. Light danced between leaves. Water glowed in the moonlight. Every stone hummed with memory. The planet itself had become a living archive, not of human triumph, but of their mistakes, their pain, their growth. Each visitor left changed, not brainwashed, not programmed, just opened across the galaxy. Rebellion stopped mid-strike. Trade wars dissolved without negotiation. Fleets stood down without orders, because those who had touched Earth no longer wanted conquest. They wanted understanding. That was the human weapon, not lasers, not machines, not domination, but awakening. And in response, the ancient object that had first signaled humanity's return sent out a second message. This time, it was addressed to all. They remembered who they were. Now remember who you were, or be left behind. And the galaxy listened, because even silence, when shared by 1,000,000 stars, becomes a voice. And that voice now echoed with a single, terrifying, beautiful truth. Humanity was never the end of the story. They were the beginning of something greater. In the final hours before the galactic calendar reset, a moment marked only once every 10,000 cycles, a strange stillness swept through every system. Ships paused in their paths. Mining drills fell silent. Even the artificial suns dimmed slightly, as if honoring something older than time. It wasn't tradition, wasn't law. It was something else, something ... felt across the galaxy. Species who once warred now watched the stars in silence, unified by a question that no longer needed to be spoken. Will they come? No. And then, just as the last second of the calendar ticked away, the stars shifted, not visibly, not physically, but in meaning. From the black edges of uncharted space, 8 beams of light converged into a single point. And in that moment, the sky did not explode. It remembered because it wasn't a weapon. It was a memory. Humanity's final gift. A memory not of war or power, but of choice. 8 representatives, one from each ancient corner of the original council, were pulled into a dream, not a prison, not a threat. A shared vision. They stood in the center of a broken Earth, surrounded by tall grass and wind that carried no sound. Before them stood no humans, only a single message, carved into the sky itself. We did not leave you. You stopped walking with us. The representatives tried to speak, but their words fell flat, because the dream was not about them. It was about what came next. They were shown visions of a galaxy, without hierarchy, where knowledge flowed without permission, where no species claimed dominion over the stars, where the smallest voices were amplified, not silenced, and where the mistakes of the past were not buried but taught. They were shown what humanity had become, not rulers, not saviors, but memory itself, living stream of what was, what could be, and what must never be again. The vision ended. The representatives woke, and each of them wept, not because they were afraid, but because they had hoped for this without knowing it. That was the final. It's a transformation, not of power, but of purpose. And as the new era began, Earth finally spoke one last time, broadcast to every ship, every station, every creature who dared to listen. The stars are not ours to rule. They are ours to share. If you can carry memory without fear, then walk with us. Otherwise, fade with what you built. The message ended. The light faded. The human seat in the council chamber dimmed for the first time in months. But it did not go out. It simply breathed, waiting, watching, because this was no longer a story of humanity alone. It was a story of everyone, of those who watched humans rise, fall, vanish, and return not as conquerors, but as witnesses, and now across every world. From the deepest gravity wells to the highest orbiting cities, a new question echoed, not in fear, but in hope. If they walked beyond stars, can we learn to follow? The answer? It was no longer in words. It was in what came next.